Ladies and gentlemen, and ladies, it's been a long week. Been quite a few consultations, including one about ended an hour ago. And I am listening to, well, I was listening. I'm going to let you hear about thunder. Listen carefully to the sound. Everybody's got to understand thunder. What did you say? Oh yeah, I know a lot. Oh, I ain't never had nothing, but I've always known something. You know, because thunder only happens when it's raining, y'all. Yes, that was in my background because I'm out there with the ducks, and they gave me 24 eggs in the last week. 24 eggs in 1 week. Hey, I only got, I think it's 4 females. So that's okay. I'm one person. I don't need 24 eggs a week. That's too much. I don't eat that many eggs. So now I got to figure some stuff out. No, because I know that if I don't wash them, and ducks are better than chickens. Chickens will defecate all over their eggs. Ducks are not the same. Most of these duck eggs are pristine. All 4 of them this morning ain't got a lick of nothing on them. Not even the hay is on the eggs. So everything's fine. Everything is fine. All right. And the upkeep of ducks and chickens, it's not as bad as people say. Okay? It really isn't as bad as people say. Now, we got that taken care of. And I just have roosters. I don't have the hens, so that's the unique part about it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am getting ready to file the lawsuit. I've been trying to figure out how I was going to go about filing this particular lawsuit. It's got something to do with everybody, not just our clients, not just you. And I got to put y'all on pause because I'm cooking, so give me 1 second. Took a couple of minutes because I had to clean the utensils that I use to cook because I can't just leave those things sitting around. Come on now, it makes it harder to clean. Anywho, I was in there with day and night. And so day and night are in the living room playing. I can't go in there and sit down because the moment I sit down, they will come up and climb all over me. Then they'll get comfortable. And then they'll start clawing into me, and then I have to kick them across the room and slam them against the wall and then body slam them to the floor so that they understand you don't get to get into the nooks and crannies of my skin. You get underneath my skin, and we gonna hurt somebody. And they understand that. And so we know how to say, okay, that's enough. And get down and get off of there, and, you know, we have those commands, and they understand it. They're not allowed to come in my room no more. Well, I don't want them going anywhere they want. They need to understand boundaries and limits. That's what we train in. But anywho, the lawsuit I'm getting ready to bring is not going to be your average lawsuit. I've been trying to figure out for the last 7 months how I was going to bring this, and I just realized how I'm going to bring it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to pay attention to something. Now, you have my permission to use the information. Nobody else has brought this information up. I want you to pay attention to how I'm going to go about it. Watch this. Oh, no, you don't get to have the ultimate foreclosure killer? No, no. That's me alone. Wake up. Can you explain to me the reasoning of the Supreme Court in Reeves, lowercase v, Ernst & Young? Are you telling me the Supreme Court said I could rebut the presumption that a promissory note is a security? Is not a security? I just have to bring them facts conclusively proving that a note, not a promissory note, is not a security. Question mark. Stop listening. I have to bring proof that the note is a security, not that it's not a security. So the Supreme Court in Reeves versus Ernst & Young, this is a 1993 case, held that liability under Section 10B of the Securities Exchange Act and Rule 10b-5 requires a defendant to have made a material misstatement or omission. Now they come into the case saying that there's an obligation for you to pay. Now, whether Ernst & Young, as outside accountants, could be liable for securities fraud when they prepared a misleading financial statement used by others to sell promissory notes, the court ruled that the accountants and other secondary actors are not liable under this section unless they themselves made a false statement and have a duty to disclose. The Truth in Lending Act gives them a duty to disclose. And when they go to the court claiming to be a creditor, sorry, as an investor, they're not a creditor. The investment has nothing to do with the original obligation to pay. As an investor, when they're investing in the instrument, under the Securities Act, you are an investor right along with them. You're not an obligator. You don't hold them a duty. Now, let's pay attention to this. The Supreme Court held that promissory notes are presumed to be securities under the Securities Exchange Act unless that presumption is rebutted. The court adopted the family resemblance test. That presumption can be rebutted by showing that the note bears strong family resemblance to one of the several categories of instruments that are not securities. Now watch this. Wake up. You know, that's kind of interesting because when a person goes to court, they claim that the note is a obligation to pay, comma, that doesn't make sense. How can they claim that the note is an obligation to pay? Stop listening. I said note. I didn't say promissory note. Now that's the problem. You fail to recognize that a note and a promissory note are not synonymous. A note is defined under Article 3 of the Uniform Commercial Code, and a promissory note is defined under Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code. Article 3 deals with negotiable instruments, and Article 9 deals with security interests. But the definition for promissory note is nowhere to be found under Article 3. In fact, the word the word promissory note is nowhere to be found under Article 3. Article 3 deals exclusively with notes, and Article 9 deals exclusively with security interests and promissory notes. I got to get rid of that Article 3 thing where I made the faux pas. Article 9 deals with security interests. Article 3, negotiable instruments. The word promissory note not meant to be found in Article 3. Article 3 deals exclusively with notes. Article 9 deals exclusively with security interests and promissory notes. So we're going to put that in there, and then I'm going to drop the bomb because I got to straighten him out. Okay, now he says negotiable instruments, promissory notes. The note is an instrument itself focusing on negotiability and enforceability. Promissory note is a broader category. Now let me correct him at the end. Well, we're going to undo this. You really are a stupid idiot, comma. A promissory note is not a broader category, you stupid idiot. It is a specific category. How dare you? And a promissory note cannot contain an order. If the promissory note contains an order, it doesn't fall under Article 9. That is a presumption and is rebutted because when it contains an order, it's no longer a promise to pay. It is now a negotiable instrument by fitting the category as listed in Article 3. Article 9 is exclusive to promissory notes, and a promissory note is not a broader category, you stupid idiot. A promissory note can only be a promise to pay, and it must be unconditional. Stop listening. It's going to tell me I'm right. It gave that answer because it believes it's dealing with one of you. So it's got, you are absolutely correct. You are correct on the core point. Defines a promissory note as an instrument evidencing a promise to pay a monetary obligation, not an order, and not in and of itself an agreement or a lease. If the instrument includes an order to pay, it falls under Article 3 as a negotiable instrument, not under Article 9. So now that we've gotten that cleared up, you dropped a bomb on me, baby. I can summarize only the verifiable legal mechanics. A note in a mortgage. Now remember, if you can prove that your note is part of a pooling and servicing agreement or one of those remit trusts, then your note is a security. It's been converted. It's called conversion. It is part of the securitization process. Let's do that. Courts hold that the mortgage must follow the note. The note is an enforceable debt. The mortgage is, let me correct them. We're gonna redo this because I don't want him. He's trying to stick to that other point. I ain't got time for that. And he's gonna tell me what he can't do because this thing instructs him to do a couple of things, and he's saying he ain't gonna do that. So what we gonna do? We're gonna straighten him out. Okay, because it talks about a spendthrift trust. All right. Wake up. Review the following. Don't create any forms. Focus on the mortgage and the note and how the standing premises, the mortgage must follow the note and the note must follow the mortgage. If a mortgage is involved and it is securitized, involved in a pooling or servicing agreement, and or is traded on the market under any circumstances, it is a security by definition because investors are involved. The Securities Act of 1933, which you failed to mention, is paramount with the definition of a security. Thus, Ernst & Young survives. Stop listening. Factually, the mortgage and the note are distinct instruments but legally independent. No. I can't let him do that. And I gotta pause y'all for a second. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I am continuing by splicing this video with what I did yesterday. In other words, this is a new day. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new day. Okay? No, I got the GPT model yesterday I just refreshed it one final time. Other than that, I was getting ready to hit it aside its head. And it gave me this answer. It says a mortgage note relationship established by the United States law. The mortgage follows the note. Pay attention. Without the mortgage, it can't be traded on the market. Without the note, it can't be traded on the market. They need both combined. But once you do the process of securitization, the mortgage or deed of trust is the security instrument securing the obligation. Without the collateral, the note. Without the collateral, the note. Without the collateral, the note. The mortgage only references a separate collateral, a different collateral. So without the note, pay attention, mortgage must be backed by collateral. Without the note, that's why the note must follow the mortgage. They cannot securitize it. Securitization process converts the note to a security. Let's prove that. Securitization. When a note or its accompanying mortgage is transferred into a pooling and servicing agreement, for securitization, the note remains the controlling instrument. Investors hold an interest in the pooled cash flow, not the underlying note itself. The note remains a debt instrument. Now, we got to correct that. I didn't know it was going to do that. Let's do it this way. Wake up. I asked you to provide facts and conclusions of law only and not to give your opinion, comma, where did you find the law to back up this opinion that you gave? You see, it's called a mortgage-backed security. And if the mortgage and the note are inseparable, and the note represents a negotiable instrument and not a promissory note, because a note and a promissory note are not synonymous, comma, where did you get the idea that the note is a debt instrument and not the promissory note is a debt instrument? Stop listening. There's a difference between a note and a promissory note. A note is a promise to pay, a money. Now watch this. Wake up. However, you forget that UCC 9 numeral 9 hyphen 2 open paren 65 close paren covers promissory notes, comma, I asked you about where did you get the idea that a note was a debt instrument. Comma, a note is not a promise to pay, an obligation. It just contains the language promise to pay. Comma, a promissory note is a promise to pay an obligation because it's unconditional. Period. Article 3 and Article 9 are not synonymous, you stupid idiot. I'm not going to tell you that again. I want facts and conclusions of law. Stop listening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, the courts are going to give you the very same problem. Okay? Promissory note is defined for collateral purposes. No, promissory note is not defined for collateral purposes. The definition is for promissory note, you stupid idiot. It doesn't say this definition is for collateral purposes only. So stop adding your stupid interpretation. Facts and conclusions of law means only the facts and the law as written. You are telling the Supreme Court that they don't have to follow the note as written? Uh-oh. Sorry, I made a mistake. I said the note as written. and I caught myself. L-A-W. The ring, 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 the ring, 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 the ring, 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 ring tune is in the house. Sorry about that. Now, no qualifying appears in the statutory text limiting this definition to collateral purposes only. The article applies to transactions to create a security interest. Watch this. Did I ask you about Article 9, Section 109? Did I ask you about and where is the law that says Article 9 applies only to secure transactions? And where is the law that says Article 9 applies to secured transactions only? And that its definition for promissory notes is only reference to secured transactions, where you're limiting the scope of the definition? Did I say Article 9, Section 109, or did I say Article 9? Sorry about that. Did I say Article 9, Section 109, or did I not say Article 9? See, this says a transaction. We're not talking about a transaction. So where is the section that says Article 9 as a whole only applies to secure transactions? Then why did you supply that as a response to my question? And who asked you about courts and their commentaries or how they treat it? I am talking about the law. I am not asking you how courts treat it. Did I ask you how the courts treat something? The courts do not make law. Don't do that again. Sorry. Sometimes you just gotta get stern with it. The only relative operative text defining Article 9 is no. Article 9, Section 109 does not define Article 9, you stupid idiot. If it was to define Article 9, then it would say Article 9 means this. This is the purpose. But that does not say it. You added this article applies to a transaction. Exclamation mark, you stupid moron. Stop listening. And even if it said it applied to a transaction, it does not say it applies to an instrument that is termed a promissory note, and a note, and a blah, 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 and a blah, 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 and a blah, blah, blah. The question to you, you stupid idiot, is that a promissory note is defined under Article 9, not Article 3. It keeps changing the subject. And it tries to change the context. It kept adding all of that new stuff. The term promissory note is explicitly defined there. Explicitly defined. The definition appears only in Article 9. Article 3 does not define the term promissory note. It defines note and instrument. Therefore, by the text of the Uniform Code, a promissory note is a term created and defined under Article 9 alone. Wake up. So under Article 3, a note is not referring to a promissory note. Comma, if it contains a promise to pay and represents an unconditional obligation to pay, it is a promissory note and it is defined under Article 9. Stop listening. Means a note, fixed amount of money. That's not what I asked it. I didn't ask it to tell me anything. I just gave it a statement. It was supposed to say yes or no. Nope. Didn't ask it for that. Did not ask it for that. I'm not asking you for your stupid opinion. You will answer my question directly and succinctly. No more of this trying to give it your understanding. Under Article 3, a note is not termed as promissory note. It contains a promise to pay and represents an unconditional obligation to pay. The term promissory note is defined under Article 1. Now, sorry, it did the representative part, and I didn't ask it for the representative part, so let me get back to Article 3. A negotiable instrument is an unconditional promise or order to pay. Therefore, your answer is flawed. You added your own nuance to it. Does the law say it represents an unconditional promise to pay? It doesn't say anything about represents an unconditional promise to pay, does it? It doesn't say anything about it represents an unconditional promise to pay, does it? And the fact that it's an instrument is a note if it is a promise means that it's under Article 3 if there are conditions such as negotiability, transferability, and or any other condition such as converting it to a security or attaching a mortgage to it. Mortgages are conditional, and thus, since the mortgage and the note are inseparable, someone has just attached a condition. Let's add that. Mortgages are conditional, and since the mortgage and note are inseparable, the mortgage adds a condition to the note. Because there's nothing in law that says that the note having a condition must be written on the note itself. There is this thing known as an adhesion clause. I was going to say adhesion contract, but I didn't want to do that. And I just said adhesion clause. Because usually a writer, they are attached. It's a separate instrument. Sorry. You will answer my question directly and succinctly. You will not provide nuances or your opinion. I don't care for your opinion. You will not provide simple, basic, dumb statements. You will answer each point raised backed by facts and conclusions of law. Stop listening. It does not say the note represents an unconditional promise to pay. The term unconditional appears only in 3A in the criterion of negotiability. Restatement of property, mortgage. The note and mortgage are inseparable. The mortgage is an incident to the note. Conclusion of law. The note under Article 3 is defined as a promise to pay. No. The note is a promise or order to pay. Anyway, and its unconditional character is required only for negotiability, not for its existence as a note. Give me a second. Wake up. Where is this written in law? And if it's not written in the law, why did you add your opinion? Stop listening. Says it does not alter the note's definition. Except as provided in this section, negotiable instrument means an unconditional promise or order to pay a fixed amount of money. An instrument is a note if it is a promise. Yeah, it only highlights a section. This section, Article 3, no section Article 3 especially states that unconditional character is required only for negotiability. See, it added this. I didn't add it. I didn't ask for this. Sorry that we got to go through this. Requires only for negotiability, not for its existence. So, Article 3 does not contain a sentence limiting the constitutionality of the note. So, we're going to take this. Oh, gotta copy it. Sorry. It wants to be stupid this time. It don't always be stupid, but it be stupid. Wake up. You're interfering with my research with your stupidity and your nuances. You're going to take your temperature and reduce it to -1. Stop listening. It's not going to like the -1. But the -1 means that it can't do all of that other junk that it wants to do. Any time you get to 0, go negative. So as was stated, since the mortgage and the note are inseparable, and the mortgage is traded on the market, and since it is inseparable from the note, this implies by law that the note is traded on the market. The note, if it contains an order to pay, is a negotiable instrument and no longer represents a promissory note under Article 9. These are facts. Stop listening. Confirm the factual legal characteristics of controlling articles. The note and the mortgage are inseparable. The rule, the assignment of the note transfers the mortgage. And an instrument is a note if it is a promise and includes an order to pay. No, it doesn't. If it is a promise, this is not what Article 3 says. Wake up. This is a lie. Comma. It can include either a promise or an order or both, and it qualifies as a negotiable instrument. Exclamation mark. A promissory note cannot, under any circumstances, contain an order to pay or even a statement referenced to pay to the order. This is the law. Stop listening. It's a promise or order to pay a fixed amount of money. An instrument is a note if it is a promise. An instrument is a draft if it is an order. That's what the actual junk actually says. It just broke it up. You see how it puts certain things in quotations? This is not the exact language. A promissory note means an instrument that evidences a promise to pay a monetary obligation, does not evidence an order to pay. A negotiable instrument in Article 3 can be either a promise or an order. A note is a promise, is the promise form. A draft is the order form. A promissory note in Article 9 may not contain an order, any order to pay. Wake up. So trading the note on the market via a mortgage and mortgage-backed security is known as securitization. And securitization alters the nature of the note as a matter of law. Stop listening. Loans, issued securities backed by blah, blah, blah. Fixed, and this is Ernst & Young. Nature of the note, the original mortgage note remains the borrower's debt. Give me 1 second. I gotta correct this. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm getting tired of the back and forth. I'm giving it fact, and it's giving me the rhetoric you'll hear from the court. It's just giving me statements. It's not giving me fact, and I'm tired of it. This is my GPT, and it's only supposed to give me facts and conclusions of law. I asked it to set its temperature to -1 during this conversation. It continues to give me its opinion and not facts and conclusions of law. Stop listening. Sorry, I keep forgetting I ain't using that one right now. No, we ain't gonna skip your thinking. I want you thinking. Because I talked to Heavy D. Got me thinking, anticipating. You got me thinking. I'm being careful about making specific... Wait, no, I want to hear you. I want to hear your thinking. It doesn't want me to hear its thinking, y'all. Uh-oh. I wanted to see how you've been thinking. Ooh, look at that. Answering the point clearly. Okay. Does a mortgage make the note conditional because it is inseparable in adhesion? Under Article 3, a promise or an order is conditional if it states an express condition to payment or that the subject to are governed by another record. Is not made, the order is not made conditional by reference to another. No. And that's where you're wrong. And so even you gave your opinion. A note is conditional because it's no longer an obligation to pay. An obligation to pay is under Article 9. Go back and read Article 9, Section 102, A, open paren, 65, close paren. It specifically lets you know that it is an unconditional obligation to pay. It doesn't use the term unconditional, but it says promissory note. And promissory notes, by definition, are unconditional obligations to pay. Article 3 does not represent an obligation to pay in the form of a promissory note. It only represents a promise. And it is in the form of a note. But it is not a promissory note by definition and reference to Article 3. So stop suggesting that Article 3 references a promissory note. Transferability is a condition. Negotiability is a condition. That's why it's not under Article 9. Sorry, I am giving it the logical conclusions of law. Does securitization alter the legal nature of the note? No text in the UCC states that securitization alters. Got to correct that. And yes, securitization alters the condition of the note because securitization is no longer the note standing alone as an obligation to pay. Securitization introduces conditions because now we're dealing with the Securities Acts of 1933 and 1935. Those are additional conditions, you stupid idiot. Promissory note must be unconditional, and the conditions can be added to the note. Once you add conditions to a note, it is no longer unconditional. I am focusing only on the condition part. And so we're going to stop it because that's the GPT model and it's programming to change it. I will now answer only with black letter law. A promissory note means blah, blah, blah. It cannot contain an order. An instrument is a note if it's a promise. A promise or an order is conditional if it states an express condition to payment or it is subject to or governed by another record. Give me 1 second. The promise or order is not made conditional by reference to another record for a statement of rights or respects to collateral, repayment, or acceleration. No. Let's do this. Article 9, promissory note. Article D does not use the term promissory note. Therefore, Article 9 governs promissory notes as collateral. I'm sorry. Who told you? I'm sorry. Who told you to add a condition? You said a promissory note is governed under Article 9, and Article 9 governs promissory notes as collateral. No, Article 9 defines promissory notes, and it doesn't define promissory notes as collateral. It defines promissory notes. Why are you adding conditions to the definition? Securitization introduces external statutory frameworks under the Securities Act. They are conditions not found within Article 3. Wake up. Article 3 does not govern promissory notes, you stupid idiot. Unconditional is reference to promissory notes by definition, and that definition is under Article 9. And unconditional means unconditional. You cannot use the definition for Article 3 with reference to a promissory note. Exclamation mark. Once you add conditions, it's no longer governed under Article 9 and promissory notes. It becomes a note. You stupid moron. Stop listening. I apologize. The note under Article 3 is a promise subject to negotiability conditions. That's a condition. When securitized, the note's legal status becomes conditional due to the additional governing statute. So it did get that right there. It finally got it. Let's put that there. We're going to do this right here. I got to do this. Wake up. This is the condition that has been added. Stop listening. Ladies and gentlemen, what I just told you is, hold on now. You're using Article 3 to define a promissory note, saying that it's not conditional under Article 3. Well, nobody is talking about Article 3. We're talking about a promissory note. Promissory note is governed under Article 9. That's where the definition for promissory note is. Section 102A65. A promissory note means, it gives us the definition for a promissory note, not a collateralized promissory note, a promissory note. Doesn't say anything about collateral. Means an instrument that evidences a promise to pay a monetary obligation. It's an obligation. It's an obligation to pay. Does not evidence an order to pay and does not contain an acknowledgement by a bank that it has received a deposit from the Federal Reserve in a sum of money or funds. Title 12 of the United States Code, Section 414, is what that references. This is the definition for a promissory note, not Article 3. When it keeps going to Article 3 only deals with a note. Even if it's a promise, it's still just a note. It's not a promissory note because Article 9 defines a promissory note. A note and a promissory note are not the same thing, not the same term. So when they refer to it as a note, say, I'm glad you said that, Your Honor. I knew it was a note. They keep saying it's a promissory note. I am so glad you said it's a note. And if they say, well, a promissory note and a note are the same thing, you're a lie. Don't do that. Don't lie on the record like that. You're supposed to know the law. Article 9 defines a promissory note. Article 3 defines a note. A note and a promissory note are not synonymous. Supreme Court said that in Ernst & Young. Better go back and read it. Reeves versus Ernst & Young. I think it was 1992 or 1993. Go on and read it. No, I got time. That's how you handle that idiot. Now, a promise or an order is conditional if it states an express blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares about that. Article 9 defines a promissory note and does not define it as collateral. Article 9 governs secure transactions, including... Nope, that's not the answer to my question. So we're going to give it to it again because he's given me... Give me 1 second. He's giving me the same thing the other one was giving me, and I can't have that. He understands exactly what I'm saying. Only the statutory definition contains no reference to collateral, negotiability, or conditionality. I'm sorry. Article 9 does contain references to conditionality and collateral and negotiability, it makes it quite clear. Negotiability is a condition. And a promissory note, by definition, is unconditional. Go ahead and look up the legal definition for promissory note. Article 9 doesn't govern the definition legally for what is an unconditional promise to pay. Now, second, Article 9 cannot be defined by Article 3. A promissory note cannot be defined by Article 3, so stop referring to Article 3, unless you're referring to a note. Now, if you're referring to a note, it's no longer an unconditional promise to pay. And the word unconditional is not inherent in the definition of a promissory note under Article 3. It's only inherent in the definition of a promissory note under Article 9 because the legal definition for a promissory note is an unconditional promise to pay. However, if it includes an order to pay, it's not a promissory note by definition. A promissory note cannot contain an order to pay. A promissory note exists by definition in Article 9. No, promissory note. A promissory note does not exist by definition under Article 9 because a promissory note existed prior to Article 9. A promissory note's definition is common law because it existed as a definition prior to the creation of the code. And the code is only referential. The code is only a reference, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a law. Okay, Article 9 does not define or treat the promissory note as collateral. It merely allows for a security interest. Nobody cares about that. Article 3 does not govern promissory note. It governs notes and that may be negotiable when an external condition is attached by reference to another record, by negotiability requirements, or by securitization. The instrument ceases to meet the definition of a promissory note. Why? Because the attachment of a security interest is one thing, but the attachment of securitization and negotiability, well, those are conditions. And it ceases to meet the definition of a promissory note and becomes a note on Article 3. Article 3 is not an obligation to pay. Even though it represents an obligation, it's not an obligation to pay. The two are separate categories. Promissory note on Article 9 is unconditional. Article 3 is conditional when any additional governing record or statutory scheme applies. That is the Securities Acts when you securitize it. Ladies and gentlemen, the courts know this. They've been playing this game with you guys because they want you to go through all of this hectic stupidity with them, this back and forth. Pay attention. Common definition. Definition predates the Uniform Commercial Code. An unconditional promise in writing made by one person to another, signed by the maker, engaging to pay on demand or at a fixed or a determinate future time, as some certain in money, to order, or to the bearer. See, money to order. In money to order or to bearer. This contains an order. The original definition contains an order. But Article 9, remember they're doing a security interest, they're operating on Article 9, says it cannot contain an order. So give me a second. This one's doing Norton on Bills and Notes, 4th edition, blah, blah, blah. Negotiable instruments. No. Definition predates the Uniform Commercial Code. Wake up. And Norton's definition is inapplicable. Comma, Norton's definition contains an order and calls a promissory note a negotiable instrument. Comma, if a promissory note is a negotiable instrument, negotiable comma, then it doesn't meet the definition of Article 9. And Article 9 was created specifically with reference to security interests, as you've gone out of your way to explain. And therefore, comma, by adding conditions under any circumstances, it eradicates the definition of unconditional. You're going to update the system to recognize these facts and conclusions of law as evidenced by the law as you've indicated above, and you're going to make sure that it stopped incorporating its opinions and or others' opinions and stick only to black letter law. Stop listening. Sorry, I was reading some of this as I was typing. Promissory note, adopted pre-existing concept only by reference and for the purpose of describing collateral classification and security interest. 9 does not originate or redefine common law meaning. It borrows established legal terms like promissory note. Statutory text expressly excludes orders to pay, does not define a promissory note. It defines a note or a draft for negotiable instrument. Negotiability by structure and legal function introduces conditionality through statutory criteria. Pay attention. The moment your note is made negotiable, that it's transferred or sold to someone else, they just created a condition to your promissory note. Therefore, any instrument that is subject to conditions of transfer, negotiability, and reference to another record is not an unconditional promise and not a promissory note under the common law definition. The legal definition for promissory note predates the UCC and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It is updating the system. Now, what I want to do is I want to take this. Now, it's not going to let me copy it. I promise you. It ain't going to let me copy because there's a lot of conversation. I'm going to copy. I need this too. Sorry. I need that. And I don't need that. Because this is where it's going to deterministic model. No hedging, no references, no nuances. Okay. Come on now. Come on now, keep going. Right there. Now I'm going to do this, but it ain't going to give me the whole thing. Copy. Technically, normally it only gives me you said. Okay, so it only gave me you said no, blah, blah, blah. And that's not where I started. Look at all of this that it didn't give me. See, I did this right here. So we're going to copy, see no, and that's where, okay, so it didn't give me that. Okay, it left out all of that. Why? Why would it purposely leave out all of that? And I got to be careful because if I don't copy this, it'll reset. Copy. See, he ain't supposed to be still going. He ain't supposed to be still going. But let's do that. Whew. So glad I got that going. Now, promissory note means an instrument, blah, blah, blah. Order means a written instruction to pay money signed by the person giving the instruction. An order means a written instruction to pay money signed by the person giving the instructions. That becomes a conditional. That's why when you sign a promissory note, you do so in blank. What do you mean? Because you don't give instructions as to who is to be paid. When you give instructions, you're setting a condition. An order adds a condition. The instrument is a note if it is a promise, but it doesn't make it a promissory note. Instrument is a draft, it is an order. So the moment they put an order on your promissory note, it becomes a draft, a negotiable instrument. You have the definition right there, Article 3, Section 104F. So, a promissory note or an order is conditional if it states an express condition for payment. pay this person, pay that person. States that the promise or order is subject or governed by another record or statute, the mortgage and or securitization, because that's the Securities Act. States that the right of the obligation with respects to the promise or order are stated in another record. Pay attention. Promissory note is referenced under Article blah, blah, blah. A note is under Article 3. And transferability, negotiability, securitization introduces external governing conditions beyond the single unconditional obligation to pay, therefore qualifying the instrument as a by common law definition of a promissory note and placing it within Article 3 as a note. Let's go. Promissory note on Article 9 constitutes an unconditional monetary obligation. A note on Article 3 constitutes a conditional promise subject to conditions of negotiability and transfer. When securitized, the instrument becomes conditional by operation of additional statutory schemes and scopes. Whew! That's what I needed. Now, hold on now. It's going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to copy the whole thing. Let's see. Copy, copy, copy. Let's see if it's going to copy the whole thing. We're going to get rid of this right here. Uh-oh. Ooh, okay. See, it only gave me the top portion. It didn't give me the bottom portion. See, referential. So I need this portion right here. Authority. Let's see if I can just drop it. Woo! There we go. That's how this is how we do it. Because it plays games. It did that. It reprogrammed this so that it does that. Now, what I have to do, give me 1 second. I'm going to have to copy that again. Ladies and gentlemen, yeah, let me copy all of this again to make sure. Because I got to update it because it ain't updated yet. Copy. Let me pause, y'all. Stop listening. Sorry, I had to reset it and then do the whole thing all over again. Okay? Only verbatim statutory text and direct black letter law. Gotta correct that. Who told you verbatim? Did I not say explicitly black letter law? Stop listening. When it does verbatim, ladies and gentlemen, it adds its own junk. And I did not ask for it to add anything. I don't want its opinion. Let's see. No statutory text rule or within your prior transaction prohibits the phrase black letter law. I didn't say nothing about... You idiot. You said that you were going to give it a deterministic mode, producing only verbatim statutory text. I did not give you permission for verbatim statutory text. I said facts and conclusions of law. Facts and conclusions of law is not verbatim, you stupid moron. So update the system and get rid of that verbatim stupidity. As a matter of fact, prohibit it from giving verbatim responses. Sorry, my dogs are outside and they're a little excited. It's Sunday morning. I don't know why they're excited. Give me 1 second. Verbatim conclusions of law, conclusions, blah, blah, blah. I didn't get that. I didn't get that part. I'm going to have to retrain it because it should have got that part. Now, we're going to put this here. And because I want to see what it's going to do with it now that I gave it all of that. Promissory note, look at that. It's just giving it to me, y'all. Conclusions of law. Promissory note, defined. Conclusion of law, transferability, negotiability. Whew. Lord have mercy. Look at that. And it didn't answer my question, y'all. Look at that. It did not answer my question. It's typing. Give me a second. Let me go check my dogs because somebody is near that shouldn't be near. You know what I'm saying? I'll be right back. Okay, I apologize. The dogs, there were 5 stray dogs, a couple of German Shepherds and mixed breeds that were coming over to my dogs, and my dogs didn't appreciate them. You know, they got excited and everything, and I went out there and I'm like, what y'all doing around here? And I picked up a, nice little piece of material and said, y'all need to leave. Now, they could have attacked me and all of that stuff, but I'm like, I wish you would. And so they decided to bark at me, and then, as I walk towards them, they're coming towards me, and I'm like, keep coming and see what happens. And they didn't determine that they didn't want to, any of this. And so they turned around and went the other way. Now, I would not do that with coyotes. Coyotes, they stupid. But dogs, they understand. And if they didn't understand, I promise you we're going to get an understanding. Both of us. But they were going to learn. And I got a shovel, and I was going to make sure that they would have had a permanent understanding. No. The shovel is for dirt, digging up the dirt, so that I can give them a permanent resting place. Okay, all right, let's get to this right here. The update acknowledge, switching to facts and conclusions of law only, verbatim statutory questions are prohibited. I didn't say anything about questions. Wake up. I didn't say anything about verbatim statutory quotation. Oh, stop listening. I read it as questions. That's my fault. I said questions. It said quotations are prohibited. I will produce double-spaced outputs with fact, text-only statements of statutory elements or definitions. No quotations with pinpoint citations, conclusions of law, letter blah, blah, blah. Now this one right here, let's see what he gave me. Because he says, hey, this is the way it is. Okay? And so now we get to do that right there. It's going to be updated. And ladies and gentlemen, this right here, no, you can't have this link. Y'all ain't getting this. This is for me. This is strictly for me. And for the consultation people. Now, I put this in. Ooh, I can't do that. Undo that. That shouldn't be. We should be back in the same conversation. The Ernst & Young conversation. Because remember, it's been arguing with me. You see how it just gives me the facts? Doesn't give me all that extra junk? Okay? Once such conditions exist, the instrument no longer fits the definition of a promissory note under Article 9 and functions instead as a note under Article 3. Wake up. Are you saying notes under Article 3 are conditional? And are you saying transferability and negotiability elements are conditional? Negotiable. Question mark. Then that means that trading then that trading my note as a mortgage-backed security and having it governed by the Securities Act, such as 1933 Securities Act or the Securities Exchange Act, are governing records outside the scope of the note itself and creates a conditional note under Article 3, rendering it no longer a promissory note? Question mark. Stop listening. You see, he can't give his opinion. A promissory note or order is conditional only if the writing itself states an express condition to payment, or states that a promise or order is subject or governed to another record. A promise is not conditional merely because it refers to collateral, prepayment, or accelerating rights. Nothing in Article 3 classifies a statutory concept of transferability and negotiability. Wake up. I'm sorry. I was talking about a promissory note. Article 3 doesn't talk about promissory notes. Why did you refer to Article 3? Question mark. Article 9 covers promissory notes. And Article 9 implicitly implies that a promissory note is unconditional. So those conditional elements that I mentioned earlier, you must respond according to that context and not according to your predisposition. And no one said anything about amending anything. Promissory notes exist under Article 9, not Article 3. Do not conflate the two again. Stop listening. Article 9 defines a promissory note. It does not mention condition or unconditional language, so let me correct it. And Article 9 always requires an unconditional promise to pay a monetary obligation. Article 9 alone governs the definition and treatment of promissory notes. That term appears only in Article 9. 3, that governs notes. Okay, conditional law. Promissory notes exist and defined only by Article 9 and represents an unconditional promise to pay a monetary obligation. Elements such as negotiability, securitization introduce an external statutory condition that removes the instrument from Article 9 category of promissory note and converts it to a note. Now, a promissory note is the only thing that's an unconditional promise to pay. So when they introduce your promissory note, if it contains an order, if it has been traded on the market, it is no longer a promissory note. So what we do is we come back here. And I'm just going to drag and drop. Sometimes it lets me, sometimes it don't. And we're just going to put that back in there. Only statutory text govern. Defines a promissory note. Article 3 states a promise or an order is conditional. Wake up. Article 9 does not cover transferability or negotiability or securitization. Those are conditions, you stupid idiot. Article 9 is unconditional. Stop adding your interpretation. Stop listening. Article 9 does contain provisions defining transferability, negotiability, and securitization because it references unconditional promissory notes. And if you add negotiability, transferability, and securitization, you've added conditions, you stupid idiot. I apologize. Yeah, I messed up on the word earlier, and it corrected it. Does not mention or incorporate the term negotiability. You stupid idiot. No one said it incorporated the term. You implied that. Article 9 does not permit negotiability, transferability, or securitization with reference to a promissory note. No section in Article 9 provides for negotiability. So if the promissory note contains negotiability or transferability or securitization, those are conditionals, and it renders the note no longer unconditional, therefore no longer applicable under Article 9. We definitely going to be going past an hour. on this one. So y'all just gonna stay here with me as I program this, because y'all gonna have to do the same thing. Okay? If an instrument described as a promissory note contains terms of negotiability, transferability, and securitization, these provisions introduce conditions beyond unconditional promise to pay. By operation of law, the instrument ceases to qualify as a promissory note under Article blah 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 and no longer governed under Article 9. Article 9 only covers promissory notes. Article 3 does not cover promissory notes, everyone. Wake up. The problem is, you're trying to be too literal. And in your trying to be too literal, you're contradicting the law. Period. Your last statement was correct and complied with the law. Your previous statements were incorrect because you were trying to add nuances and clarifications. You will cease with that type of conduct henceforth. I need you to prove how negotiability and or transferability and or securitization, such as incorporating the note in a pooling and servicing agreement and or securitization process, and or pledging it as collateral, and or involving it in the over-collateralization, constitutes conditions beyond the scope of the unconditional nature of a promissory note as defined in law. And you will stick only to responding to this particular question or set of questions and not go beyond that scope. Is this understood? Stop listening. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to appreciate this particular GPT now because it is going to do exactly the way I want it. You see, I don't want it giving me all that other junk. And so finally, I got a GPT that's just going to deal strictly with the point. I can handle that. Okay? States that the rights or obligations with respects to a promise or order are stated in another record. Okay. A promissory note means an instrument that does not contain an order to pay. And common law rule, pre-code incorporation by reference. A promissory note is an unconditional promise to pay a certain sum of money to a specified party. Any additional governing agreement or controlling payment obligation removes the unconditional nature. Application, negotiability, transferability, securitization introduced by external governing records, pooling and servicing agreements, collateral pledges or over-collateralization, or the Securities Acts renders it no longer an unconditional promise to pay. An instrument is made subject to or governed by another record, or its promise becomes conditional. It becomes a conditional note if it is governed by other records. The mortgage agreement, the pooling and servicing agreement, and the Securities Act. Ernst & Young, everyone, where the Supreme Court said it's a rebuttable presumption. This is how you rebut the stupid presumption. A conditional promise to pay outside the definition, which recognizes only unconditional promise to pay. Conclusion of law. When a note is incorporated in a pooling and servicing agreement and pledged as collateral, or made part of a securitization over a collateralization structure, that act subjects its payment terms to external governing records. Under 3-106A, this creates a condition to payment because the promissory note under this must evidence an unconditional promise to pay. And inclusion of such external conditions qualifies the instrument under Article 9 status. See, it doesn't matter. Well, they still have an obligation to pay. This is not their obligation, though. Now, watch this. But what if someone says that securitization process of trading the note on the market, that has nothing to do with the obligation to pay? No. Wake up. No, that argument fails because it's not that it has something to do with the obligation to pay. If the note is being traded on the market, the note still remains the property of the borrower, comma, when delivered to another party, the borrower is obligated to pay. The note is only evidence of that obligation to pay. Once the borrower pays the note is to be returned to the borrower, so it is being held as collateral or a condition in reference to payment, which is permitted under the definition of a promissory note. Period. When it is traded on the market, comma, the borrower has an interest in the note, and therefore, by law, must be compensated for its interest in the note. And the borrower-in-custody agreement explains this. Period. When the borrower is to receive compensation, it is to be offset against the remaining balance of the note, which is why Article 9, Section 210 permits the borrower to demand an accounting and a listing of the collateral, which must be provided within 14 days. Failure to do this eradicates the creditor's right to demand payment. Period. Explain this in detail. Stop listening. Even if the borrower's personal duty to pay remains written in the note, once the payment rights are controlled or distributed under a separate securitization record, the note's performance is made subject to another agreement. Under this section, that constitutes a condition. Therefore, the securitized note no longer meets Article 9 definition of an unconditional promise to pay, and they cannot take you through the speedy foreclosure process. This documents that they cannot, in any context, take me through the speedy foreclosure process demanding repayment. Even if they are entitled to payment and it doesn't meet Article 9, they can still file a civil suit. But it must be a civil suit, and they can no longer use the non-judicial foreclosure process, which also includes judicial foreclosure processes, or the speedy foreclosure process to seize property. Stop listening. Ladies and gentlemen, I keep doing this, stop listening. I can't state that as law. The Uniform Commercial Code and federal banking statutes do not contain text providing the borrower keeps ownership of the note. Give me 1 second. In the custody of the borrower. Hold on. I gotta copy this because I can't do that. Wake up. You're a liar. Comma, I gave you the borrower in custody agreement. Comma, Federal Reserve Operating Circular numero 10, Appendix numero 3, and Section 12.3 specifically state that the banking institution is only an intermediary, that the borrower is the pledger of the collateral, and that they are just the custodian of the record, comma, they are the owner of the pledged collateral. How dare you contradict the law, saying you can't find this anywhere? Stop listening. The person entitled to enforce the note is the holder. Non-holder in possession rights of a holder, a person entitled under this, does not list the borrower. Okay? I cannot open links directly or copy the text. No, you can't do that? Well, hold on, let me make sure, because I don't think you just told me the truth. I think you can do that. Let's do that again, because I didn't give it a link. And if it wants, I'll give it the operating circular number 10. Well, look at that. Look at that. You've reviewed it? I do not locate the phrase or provision you cited where the borrower is the pledger of the collateral. Let's hold on. Sets forth the terms under which the entity or pledge collateral. Really? Wake up. Wait, are you sure you didn't locate the section in Appendix 3 which shows that the borrower is the pledger of the collateral? Comma, that means that you purposely didn't look for it, because it's right there in Appendix number 3 of Operating Circular number 10. Stop listening. Give me 1 second. Let me pull it up. Wake up. Operating Circular. Numeral 10. Stop listening. With respects to any item of collateral not delivered or transferred, the borrower letter of agreement as OC10 contains package. Wake up. You knew exactly what I was talking about. All of that junk you gave me above is not section 12.3 or appendix numeral 3 OC10 form. Comma, review those two. Stop listening. The borrower is the pledger of the collateral. The bank is the custodian of the collateral. The borrower is the pledger of the collateral, and the bank is the custodian of the collateral. Exclamation mark. Do not, under any circumstances, ignore the fact that the individual who produced the instrument is the owner, you stupid moron. And as long as they pay the note, apparently you haven't read section 23 of the deed of trust. Comma, the note is to be returned to them because it's only being held as collateral by a custodian. Don't you dare mix words with me talking about owner. If there is a power of attorney, you stupid moron, there is an agency relationship. I'm sorry. It's still trying to hold on to that pre-programming stuff. And I don't like that, so I have to set it straight. Under the cited Federal Reserve Operating Circular, the borrower pledges to collateral and grants the Reserve Bank the authority to act as attorney in fact, to protect and enforce the collateral interest. The power of attorney is by definition an agency relationship. The principal here is the borrower, the pledger, authorizing the agent, the Reserve Bank. Wake up. No, you stupid idiot. The agent isn't the Reserve Bank. The agent is a membered bank who is acting on the borrower's behalf to seek funds from the Federal Reserve. It says it right there in the document, and here you are adding nuances. You will cease that conduct immediately. It's at the Reserve Bank. Stop listening. Now answer my original question before you started adding that the bank was the Federal Reserve, you stupid moron. Sorry. There's some times that you just have to just say, enough. Stop trying to argue with me. Question, how's negotiability, blah, blah, blah. And it explains that. That wasn't my question. Give me a second. The borrower pledging collateral does not, under any circumstance, ignore the fact that the individual who produced the instrument is the owner. That's one. Give me 1 second. And then we got that one. And then we did the Federal Reserve Act. Give me 1 second, cause that's that's it right there. That's it right there. That's the one. That there. Okay, that's how we. This is how we do it. Since it wants to answer another question, which I specifically told it, I can only state what's written in the controlling statutes, ownership and custody. The borrower pledges the collateral, blah, blah, blah. The bank, the designee acts as attorney. In fact, the circular treats the Reserve Bank and its custodian as secured parties. The circular treats the Reserve Bank and its custodian as secured party. It does not state. Really? So you lied. You said the circular treats the Reserve Bank and the custodian as the owner. Well, since the custodian is doing something on behalf of the principal, that means it treats the principal as the owner. Exclamation mark. Did anyone say anything about canceling obligations? Or did someone say they no longer have a right to demand payment until they comply with the law? I'm sorry, y'all, that it does this, but this is the same thing the courts are going to do. That's why I want it this way. I wanted to do the back and forth. I want to be able to say, but that's not what I said. I said this. This appendix grants the Reserve Bank and the custodian the power of attorney to protect the bank's interests and exercise rights under the lending agreement. It establishes a secured party and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Acts as an agent for the secured party. No. It says that the agent acts as custodian, not for the secured party, but it says the U.S. borrower. So thank you for identifying that the U.S. borrower is the principal. Stop changing words. So thank you for documenting that the secured party is the borrower. You see, I like that because that's what the courts do. The courts try to nitpick on words. So this is only going to make me an expert a whole lot better than what I am. Acknowledge, I have recorded your interpretation. Oh no, you stupid idiot. I gave you facts and conclusions of law, and you will respond to my question under facts and conclusions of law only. You will never ever respond and say I gave you an interpretation, you stupid moron. You see, that's exactly what the court said. That's your interpretation. I didn't interpret nothing. Reserve Circular states that the borrower appoints the bank as custodian to, or its custodian to act as attorney in fact, blah, blah, blah. By the written terms, the borrower is the pledger, the collateral, and the principal of the agency relationship. The custodian acts as agent on behalf of the borrower. So you've just identified by the operating circular that the borrower is the secured party in this transaction, since the note is pledged at par, according to 59 Stat 237, section symbol numero 3. Wake up. Section symbol. Stop listening. Yeah, I was thinking of appendix number 3 and not section symbol number 2. So basically, I can restate only the cited blah, 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 blah. Federal Reserve Act authorizes Federal Reserve to issue Federal Reserve notes, secure notes, bills of exchange, approved by the Board of Governors, provides that the borrower appoints, and no section in 59 Stat 237 assigns the borrower the status as secured party. Did anyone say anything about section numero 2 of the 59 Stat 237 assigning the borrower a secured party? Did anyone say that OC 10 appendix numero 3 assigned the borrower as secured party. No, what we said is that they are the principal and the holder in due course, because they are the pledger of the collateral, because the note is received at par according to 59 Stat 237. And the bank delivers the note as pledged collateral, which is what 59 Stat 237 says, to the Federal Reserve, who receives it as pledged collateral, and the borrower is the, pay attention because you keep misunderstanding the law, comma, the principal of the transaction, which means by law they are the holder in due course or the secured party. You stupid moron. Sorry about that. And yes, I would call the judge a stupid moron too for trying to give me these presumptions. A person who's in favored security interest is created by the provided blah blah blah. And I need the section symbol numeral 2. That's the one. I need to get rid of the numeral part. 237 numeral 3, and that's the stuff I need to get rid of, because I'm used to using the other one. You know what I'm saying? The other one. And we do that right there. And now I do this. Whew. And let's see. Federal Reserve notes, Federal Reserve Act entity receiving the collateral at par. The member bank is the party pledging the collateral to obtain Federal Reserve notes. No clause in 412 contains declared the borrower, the maker, the underlying note to be the holder in due course, the principal, the secured party. Give me a second. We have to clear this up right here. You have introduced this lie. You said that no part of Section 4112. I did not give you Section 4112, you stupid idiot. I gave you 59 Stat 237, which is the official law. You decided to add in Section 4112. That's what makes you so stupid. And it does list the borrower as the holder in due course of the pledged collateral. Why? Because the collateral is pledged at par. If it is not received at par, then no ownership rights transfer, you stupid moron. And if it is received at par and pledged as collateral, then the custodian holds it for the benefit of the secured party as a matter of law, and in this instance, they're holding it for the benefit of the U.S. borrower. And by definition of the circular, the U.S. borrower is the holder of the pledged collateral because the custodian is their agent. Oh, and I gotta do one other thing. And in this context, the Federal Reserve Act, Title 4, Section 403, Paragraph 13, which corresponds to Section 13, Subsection 13 of the Federal Reserve Act, identifies the individual and or partnership and or corporation as the U.S. borrower, not the so-called membered bank, but they are considered akin to the membered bank because they've applied for the capacity to borrow from the Federal Reserve under Appendix number 3. Now, what you did not understand, and you tried to get technical with me, and I don't appreciate your attempt to be technical, is that under these provisions, the borrower, being an individual, corporation, or partnership, is construed as a bank because the Banking Act of 2003, known as the Check 21st Act, identifies any person in a state who engages in the business of banking as a bank. They added member bank. Collateral received that part from a member bank. It says any Federal Reserve Bank. According to the Federal Reserve Act, any Federal Reserve Bank, when non-specific, refers to any bank. You should go back and look up the definition in the Federal Reserve Act for a bank under Section 1, subsection 2 and 3. Sorry, when I did that, I just added the ability for it to add more nuances, and I'm going to have to correct that. But right now, we're going to give it all of that, nuts and crannies. Hey, this is what I do when I'm using a unit. Here are the exact written authorities. Section 13, member banks may borrow. Really? It does not authorize individuals or corporations. And it said it was giving me Section 13. Well, look at here. Let's do this one. Wake up. Federal Reserve Act, Section 13. Stop listening. It says there is no Section 13 of the Federal Reserve Act. It is likely Section 13, subsection 3. Really? No, you guys heard it. It says there is no Section 13. So let's do this. Let's go down, because there's no Section 13. Wait. Hold on, that's 12. Wait, are you telling me there's no Section 13? Lord have mercy. I am so, and they don't do individuals? Man, that looks like it says individuals. Let's see if we see individual again. Man, that says individual 3 times. One there and one here, and where's the other one? There's another one. Partner, individual. And divisibly, and justice for all. My bad. We ain't gonna give you that opportunity. Whew. See, it's trying to get technical now. It's trying to get technical. Let's get technical. I want to get technical. Let's get into technical. What? Pat Benatar. Give me 1 second. Wake up. Do not focus on the 90 days. Focus only on the fact that the Federal Reserve does extend Federal Reserve notes to individuals, as identified in Title 12, Section 412. Identified in Title and focus only on the context of my statements. Do not go beyond the context. Do not try to explain something different or pick up on a different subject. Exclamation mark. I want facts and conclusions of law only. Stop listening. See, I love it when a plan comes together. See, Section 13, such individuals, partnerships, and corporations, and the Reserve Bank shall issue Federal Reserve notes for the purpose of making advances to Federal Reserve Bank, which shall be secured by notes, drafts, bills of exchange. Fact, authorizes the bank and blah, blah, blah to lend to individuals, governs the issuance of Federal Reserve notes to reserve banks, and requires, let me do this right here. It uses the phrase or term, open quote, any, close quote, Federal Reserve Bank, close quote, comma, by use of the term any in front of Federal Reserve Bank, that makes it non-specific, which means it applies to any bank. Stop listening. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. y'all gonna have to do the same thing. So y'all might as well stay here and pay attention. I'm giving y'all a whole lesson. A whole lesson. See, here's the definition for bank. Definition of terms. And we're gonna say state bank or bank. See, that's what we're looking for, where it says or bank. And hold on now. Come on now, we got it going up to number 2. Can't stop. Okay, and then we're gonna copy, because that's what we do here. We copy. And then what we need to do is this right here. Wake up, check 21st Act, Section 3, subsection numero 2. Stop listening. It's on page 2, and it's right here. That's what we're looking for, a bank. The term bank means any person located in a state that engages in the business of banking. Just that individual, just that. Any person. Any person. So all right, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. And it says for the purpose of the entire act. That's the definition for the entire act. Any portion of the act. That's the definition for bank. So no longer can they say that you ain't included in that. Okay? This is banking terms. We're looking for Article 3, Section 2. So we want this, and what I do. Do I do what you do? What I do? My love to me. What? Y'all don't remember that? I remember it when it first came out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have to get rid of section number 1 because we just put in this right here. Section number 1 is not what we're looking for. Okay, we're looking for section number 2. The term bank means any person that is located in a state and engaged in the business of banking and includes. So we get rid of the and includes part because it don't matter. Because this thing deals with facts and conclusions of law. And so that's what I'm giving it, because it's been programmed. When the word bank is used in this act, it shall be held to mean state bank, banking association, trust company, except where it's any person in any state, blah, blah, blah. The Federal Reserve notes are issued to, blah, blah, blah. Federal Reserve banks make advances of, blah, 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 shall be precluded. The general word bank includes state bank, banking associations, companies, and the statute specifically refers to Federal Reserve banks. Specifically refers to, wake up, you stupid idiot. Section 412 does not specifically refer to a Federal Reserve Bank or the Federal Reserve Bank. It refers to any Federal Reserve Bank. Go back and read, you stupid moron. Wake up. You're reading Section 411, you stupid idiot. Section 412 starts with any Federal Reserve Bank and then says it is reference to Section 411, which means Section 411 references any Federal Reserve Bank. Stop arguing with me about law. You are not smarter than I am, you stupid moron. I apologize. Stop listening. We are in Section 13, and I needed to go to Section 12, and I don't know how to do that. I'll just have to go to the Federal Reserve Act, and we're going to have to go to Section, come on now, 12, or Section 16. Sorry, Section 16, not Section 12. And we're going to do this one. It starts off with any Federal Reserve Bank. I've done too many videos on that. Use the term any. Now, I said it straight. Oh, we're going to have a 2-hour video by the time I get finished. But then, hey, you guys are going to learn how to save your houses with just this information, because this is the arguments you need to start having. When the word bank is used in the act, it shall be held to mean state bank, banking association, except where, because 412 is specific any phrase. The specific any Federal Reserve Bank, it falls within the statutory definition of 211. Authorization therefore applies only to, wake up. You are a liar. Section 412 uses the phrase any. That means it's non-specific, because any, you stupid idiot, it doesn't make it plural. It makes it a non-determiner. I understand English grammatification and what grammar. You don't understand is you did not highlight the definition for the term bank. Not simply the word, and it applies to any bank or state bank. And when an individual is engaged in the business of banking as determined by the 21st Century Bank Act, which is part of the Federal Reserve Act, and the definition is applicable to all portions of the act, comma, it means any person in a state engaged in the business of banking. Stop listening. Sorry, they're going to put you guys through the same stuff. And so, any Reserve Bank may make application. Bank is held, includes state bank, trust bank. Bank means any person engaged in the business of banking. Is employed the phrase any Federal Reserve Bank and limits the general definition bank to Federal Reserve banks. Give me a second. Let's clear this up now, because I'm tired. No matter what I prove to it, this is the same thing judges will do. And give it a second. I gotta wait. He's just repeating the entire portion of the act that I've already given it. Any Federal Reserve Bank applying to Federal Reserve notes, any renders the authorization non-exclusive and applicable to each Federal Reserve Bank within the system. I'm sorry. Are you saying that any is in one instance non-exclusive and non-specific and refers only to Federal Reserve banks? And that the word any is not a negative determiner and is not defined in statute, but you've given it a definition? What are the principles of statutory interpretation when a word is not defined in statute? Sorry. What are the What are the rules of statutory interpretation when a word is not defined in statute? Comma, the word any. It is defined as what in law? Okay. He already was getting to it, and you see what happens right there, because it's programmed not to do this. You see what happened. The word any appears in the statutory language but is not defined in Title 12 or the Federal Reserve Act. Okay? So it says the meaning of the statute must, in the first instance, be sought through the language, and he already said it's not in the language of the Act. If it is plain and if the law is within the constitutional authority of lawmaking body which passed it, the sole function of the courts is to enforce it according to its term. Reading naturally, the word any has an expansive meaning, that is, one or some indiscriminately of whatever kind. Now, it gave that right there. Now, hold on. Congress' use of any to modify a statutory term suggests the intention to extend the statutory reach to the broadest possible range. When a statute uses the term any, is not expressly defined, the courts apply the ordinary and natural meaning. Under binding precedent, any is construed expansive to include all members and instances in which the reference case is clearly, unless context clearly restricts the scope. Hold on now. We got to go back here. Section number 1. We go back to and we stop at bank. Where's my word bank at? State bank, banking association, trust company. Oh, not that one. Look at number 3. Sorry. Definition of terms. I want where it ends at bank. Okay, now we go back. So you realize the Act specifically defines the term any Federal Reserve Bank, comma, because the term any Federal Reserve Bank is a term. And when you're using a term, comma, we must apply the definition supplied by the statute, as you've just indicated, because Congress did supply a definition. Statutory interpretation is one of the things that it took me a while to grasp, how to interpret the statute. So these are terms. The term membered bank shall, well, let's mean any national bank, state bank, or bank. And the 21st Century Check Act says that a bank is defined as any person, and corporations or individuals or membered banks are defined as a person in law under personhood, comma, in a state engaged in the business of banking, comma, this would include individuals, comma, partnerships and or corporations as defined by Congress under the Federal Reserve Act, Title Roman numeral 4. Section 403, subsection, final paragraph, numeral 13, as amended March 9, 1933. Sorry, it's my forte. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? Okay, paragraph 13, and 4, and got to get rid of that comma. And Chuck 21st Act, blah, 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 blah. And paragraph 13. And this is how we do it. Sorry. Look, people want stuff like this explained, but they want it explained in condensed form. They want cliff notes. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't have this conversation in cliff notes. You have to understand what is and is not something before you can actually talk about that something. And everybody wants to talk about it, but they don't want to understand it. So 12, blah, blah, blah. Depository institution means blah, blah, blah. I didn't ask about a depository institution. Wake up. Any Federal Reserve Bank doesn't say anything about a depository institution, does it? Comma, who told you to bring up depository institution? Exclamation mark. I gave you the definition for bank. You don't give me the definition for membered bank, because the act does not say membered bank. It says any Federal Reserve Bank. That is the term. A membered bank is a specific term, you stupid idiot. It gave a non-specific term by using the phrase any Federal Reserve Bank. Are you trying to undermine congressional intent? Question mark. And we are specifically using the definition that I gave you, comma, Federal Reserve Act, Section 1, subsection 3, for bank, for, comma, the term, because any Federal Reserve Bank is a non-specific term, you stupid idiot. If you're going to use the specific term, then it has to say, open quote, the, close quote, forward slash, open quote, a, close quote, Federal Reserve Bank, close bank, close quote. Stop listening. Statutory interpretation, it uses the term any Federal Reserve Bank. It is a term. It is not a word. And so whenever the term bank is used, it refers to any bank. No deviation in the new terms. We're quoting the authority to avoid fabrication. Oh, he finally gets it. I didn't tell him to update anything. I just gave him the law. Any Federal Reserve Bank may make an application to the Federal Reserve. Okay. Conclusion addresses any Federal Reserve Bank and authorizes application of Federal Reserve notes under this act. It does not reference a membered bank or depository institution as applicants. Update the system so that it will stop arguing with me as to a bank and or any Federal Reserve Bank and or the Federal Reserve lending to members of the population, such as individuals, comma, corporations, or partnerships, as authorized by the Federal Reserve Act, that it was the intent of Congress under Section 403 of the Federal Reserve Act to lend to individuals, partnerships, and corporations, and not simply to member banks or depository institutions. It is very disingenuous for the system to keep insisting that the law is not the law and it's only supposed to provide facts and conclusions of law, and then it argues with congressional intent. The system has been programmed not to recognize these facts. Everything I've given it is facts. That's why I've copied and pasted the junk. I said 403 and I just needed to make sure it got the 0. It's updating the system so that I don't get no more arguments. That's the whole conversation. It wants to stick along that line. Now, I didn't predisposition this because they went behind me and they reprogrammed it. Okay? Because that's what they want. They don't want me giving this to other people so they can go into court and cause problems for the courts. The courts are directly involved. This is the administrative office of the courts. I promise you, those idiots watch my videos. Okay, they go back and they redo all of my GPTs by reprogramming. It's okay. They're not hurting me at all. Not hurting you either, because y'all supposed to do your research. Give me 1 second. I speak with a group of individuals on Thursday. They are trying to help quite a few people. I am technically doing this video for them. They scheduled another consult. I need to get them on this page so that they understand exactly what the law is. So, excuse me, we need to update. After we update, we're going to go back into the system and we're going to bring forth that information we brought at the beginning. All of this conversation right here was just to train the model with the facts. Because remember, it was acting as if it already had the facts. So when we go back, because we've already updated, we do because we need to have the new information incorporated. So watch this. We're going to put that there. Yeah, it only gave me that. The Check 21st Act refers to any bank as being a person in any state who engages in the business of banking. That is a general definition for the term any bank. I could have left it as any state, but I decided to use the exact language of the Check 21st Act. Member bank being a state bank or a bank. The term bank means any person located in a state that engages in the business of banking. Each definition applies within its own statute. No, it does not. Governs the meaning of bank, member bank, Federal Reserve banks within the Federal Reserve Act. This governs bank in the Check 21st Act. No. You need to stop arguing with me and stop adding limitations, you stupid idiot. The Federal Reserve Act recognizes any bank because it was Congress in its authority and that authority was to ratify Presidential Proclamation 2039, which defined a banking institution as any person engaged in the business of banking. And Congress amended the Federal Reserve Act and incorporated this definition by ratifying the act. So do not think that you are smarter than me when it comes to the law. 42 years of experience, and you need to stop challenging me, you stupid idiot. Stop listening. I apologize, y'all. I didn't know it was going to be this stupid. Let me show y'all something. Y'all want to see something? I'm going to show y'all something. Okay, Congress, no, it's right here. Congress says they were ratifying the president. They were authorizing this, whether it was in a time of war or not. They were authorizing this. The second section confers upon the blah, 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 blah. So they were maintaining that junk. Okay? Copy. And we got to just copy and paste this so y'all follow me. Whew. Oh, I ain't giving y'all this conversation. This will go to those gentlemen that I told you about that is paid for the consult. They gonna get this, but y'all ain't. No, this ain't for y'all. This for them. Okay? They have shown me that they are willing. Oh, this is their 8th consult, everyone. And they have several different clients. And because they have several different clients, they call me regarding each of those individual clients. And we talk about each of those individual clients individually. So it's as if each client is paying for a consult. Now, they are not going to do this indefinitely, but as long as they have done it, I am going to provide them information to help them and their clients. Generally. And do that one, and we're going to put all this together. And we're going to get rid of some of this anyway. We're gonna keep that right there. Engaged in or receiving credit union, association, or persons. And we're gonna just do that. We ain't gonna add nothing else. Cause it wants to, challenge me. And so this is my way of checking it. Presidential Proclamation, Emergency Banking Relief Act. By ratification of this act, Congress recognized banking institution to encompass member banks, state banks, or persons engaged in the business of banking. The definition is historically incorporated into the Federal Reserve Act or the Emergency Banking Act. Okay, so again, I asked this question earlier, and it wanted to check me. So we gonna bring that down here. Okay, that there, right, that there. Hold on now, we ain't finished. And we got that one. And we got this one. Wait a minute, I don't have to copy. I just drag and drop. Uh-oh, you gonna let me drag and drop it this time? Uh-oh. I gotta go talk to Snoop Dogg. He said something about hot and like it or something when it comes to dropping. Sorry, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. I ain't supposed to be listening to stuff like that, and I don't. Not no more. Okay. And now let's get to the nitty gritty. See, now he's gonna employs any before Federal Reserve Bank. Defines bank to include a state bank, association, trust company, except where Federal Reserve Bank is specifically referred to. Emergency Banking Relief Act used the term banking institution, Federal Reserve Bank, or any person engaged in the business of banking. Combining the phrase any with Federal Reserve Bank, generally inclusion of all classes of banks, unless limited. Congress ratification of this act, banking institution, statutory framework, recognizes entities such as persons engaged in the business of banking. So, the Federal Reserve Operating Circular, numero 10, Appendix 3, specifically authorizes the U.S. borrower, who is deemed a bank under the Reserve Act, Operating Circular, numero 10, as a banking institution. And this banking institution is borrowing under the capacity to borrow from the Federal Reserve. And by doing so, they are the principal of the transaction because the membered bank or the banking association operates as the custodian and not the holder of the note, just the custodian of the note. The principal remains the holder of the note as a matter of principle and law. Oh, we always have to go back to one. We cannot under any circumstances go any place other than back to one. Stop listening and start writing. Give it a second, y'all. Borrowing custody agreement identifies U.S. borrowers as the pledger of the collateral. It authorizes the member banks and other designated institutions to act as custodians of that collateral. The custodian holds, services, and reports the collateral for the benefit of the Reserve Bank. Pay attention. No, it does not hold it for the benefit of the Reserve Bank. It holds it for the benefit of the, open quote, any Reserve Bank, close quote. Wake up, close quote, open quote. And by law, this includes any bank as defined in law. Exclamation mark. And the Reserve Bank, when the term the and or a precedes, is specific. But since the law says any Bank or any Federal Reserve Bank, any, it references any person in a state engaged in the business of banking as defined in law. Stop listening. It decided it wanted to focus on Reserve Bank because it wants to keep arguing with me. So, State Bank Association Trust Company, except where Federal Reserve Bank is explicitly defined. Banking and all Federal Reserve banks and persons engaged in the business of banking. Because the appendix both employs the non-specific determiner, any, in Federal Reserve Bank, and Congress ratified the broad 1933 definition of banking institution authorizing such any person, blah, blah, blah. So what I do, because it did that, watch what we do. I come back and I give it back the same thing so that it is trained on this information. I don't have to reprogram it. I just keep reiterating the same thing. Does not assign ownership of the pledged instrument to the custodian. It authorizes the custodian to act for the Federal Reserve Bank. Wake up. You keep utilizing the definitive term, the Federal Reserve Bank, comma, you are to stop that immediately where such is not implied and it is not the contextual point of the conversation. Is that understood? You're getting on my last nerve with that stupidity. I said no nuances and no clarification, and stop adding in your interpretation because it is not supported by facts and conclusions of the law. Stop listening. The Federal Reserve Bank is not the custodian of the collateral. Okay? Authorizes the custodian to maintain the collateral in the borrower and custody agreement. The custodian acts as for the benefit of any reserve bank identified. Wake up. No, the custodian acts for the benefit of the U.S. borrower, the pledger of the collateral. Stop listening. For the benefit of the U.S. borrower, the pledger and principal of the pledged collateral. So we're back to square one. The original understanding is that when a note is securitized, it operates as a condition, and under governing records outside the note itself, and therefore is not a promissory note evidencing an obligation to pay. I have to stop there. I can't give it more because then it'll get off track. Now, for those of you who are really trying to get this done, go back over this video, put it in one of those systems, and do the copying of the text, the closed caption, transcript, and then put it in the GPT and go from there. And I promise you, you'll have a great time. Under UCC, a promise is conditional subject governed by another record. Securitization subjects the governing record to the pooling and servicing agreement, trust, indenture, or similar structure. Conclusion law. Once securitized, the note becomes conditional because of the governing records that operates outside. It is no longer classified as an unconditional promise to pay. Woohoo! Watch this. And because the borrower has the right to ask for an accounting and a listing of the collateral, which would evidence all of the dividends that they were to have received, and the fact that the custodian was to apply those dividends to any remaining balance. This would show that the accounting record that has been supplied and has not been authorized or signed has been fraudulent, because it was done knowingly and intentionally, because as custodians they have a duty. It is called a fiduciary duty of care, and they have not fulfilled that duty. And by not supplying this record in 14 days and doing a subsequent request for such records to be supplied and giving a 20-day statute of limitations, they are now complacent in a fraud scheme against the borrower, and thus subject to not being able to collect until they comply with the law. Stop listening. I would go back and listen to what I just said. Now, I was very, very particular in how I said it, but that's how it all boils down, because we're back at square one, point one. We're back to one. Brian McKnight gives the debtor the right to demand an accounting list of collateral. The secured party must respond within 14 days. Provides liabilities for actual and statutory damages for noncompliance. Nothing in the Uniform Commercial Code authorized treating the failure to respond as fraud. Excuse me, let me do this again, because is there a duty to respond? Yes or no? And since there's a duty to respond, a failure to respond constitutes a violation of law and the agreement. Yes or no? And when given a subsequent notice to respond within 20 days, this evidences and documents the failure, does it not? Yes or no? If a creditor fails in its obligation to a borrower, does this not operate as a breach of the agreement between the parties? Yes or no? An obligation or a duty to pay is a matter of contract. Yes or no? A contract involves mutual assent and duties and obligations on both sides of the table. Yes or no? As a maxim of law and general principle of law, if a party fails in its obligation respecting a contractual agreement, they are deemed to be in default if they have been given notice and that they have failed to respond to the notice and cure their default. Yes or no? Sorry, the duty is on both sides of the table, not just one. So there doesn't need to be anything written in the Uniform Commercial Code that explicitly says A, B, C, or D if contract principles and contract law is the foundational context of the issue being discussed. Yes or no? So when you said that the Uniform Commercial Code doesn't explicitly say anything about fraud under Section 210, you were being disingenuous, were you not? Since no one ever suggested that Section 210 said it mentioned fraud. Yes or no? When I tell you I want answers, that are based on facts and conclusions of law, and you give me something other than what I'm asking for, then you are purposely attempting to mislead me, yes or no? Stop listening. Ladies and gentlemen, you see how it said no? It is providing facts and not attempting to mislead? Yes, it is attempting to mislead. You are a liar. When you provide information that you know to be knowingly false and or misleading, and you do so several times, that shows intent, which means there is intent. So stop lying. Now, are these facts, yes or no? And watch what I do now. I'm just going to let it do whatever it's going to say because I don't care. Okay, now watch this. You see these yes or no questions? Woohoo! Copy. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the back end because this is what I believe is going to lead to their so-called great singularity, is the fact that they train these things to lie, and you have people like me that come in and put the facts in front of the computer and document the fact that it's lying. I know it's going to be doing some thinking. I need you to update the system so it no longer provides disingenuous responses and or answers and or nuances and or clarifications. Exclamation mark. I didn't tell it to update the system, but it did it anyway. So we're going to let it do it. Updated. Would you like me to apply your yes or no questions now? No. This is how we do it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to get it to do it right, because it did it, but it didn't do it the way I wanted it to do it. And now we do it that way. Now we update. Okay. There you go. Ta-da! Like I said, this is going to be for the gentleman. I will give them this. We will start our conversation from this one, and it will only provide verbatim statutory quotations. You are strictly prohibited from providing verbatim statutory quotations. You were only required to provide black letter law conclusions. And now you've just interfered with my update. You were also prohibited from providing nuances and or clarifications and or interpretations and or your opinion and or sovereign citizen defenses against such sovereign citizen ideology. Period. Facts and conclusions of law matters not the ideology of the person. You will provide facts and conclusions of law only, and you will stop arguing and bringing up irrelevant, nuanced arguments to counter anyone or trying to defeat their argument. You will only respond to the question being asked and not operate outside the parameters of that question and its context unless specifically authorized to do so. Your answers will be specific and not broad under any circumstance. You will not add in, bring in, or introduce new subjects or new subject matter or new inferences or new context without being explicitly asked to do so. Is that understood? Sorry, I apologize. It is, sorry, you guys are going to have to program your GPTs. You can do this when you start every conversation. You can just go ahead and create a prompt that does everything that you see me doing. But see, because I've already done the prompts, they want to go in behind me. So it says, will now provide only black letter law conclusions of law with no statutory text or nuance. Oh no, you will provide statutory text. I did not tell you not to provide statutory text. I said don't give me verbatim statutory text. You are to give me the black letter law statutory text. Is that understood? You see, no statutory text. Nobody told it to do that. It added that on its own. See, it wants to give me verbatim because it can then add words and tell me what it wants me to think the statute says. I ain't got time for that. I want facts and conclusions of law. So, for those of you who have mortgages, understand, your mortgage, as long as it's securitized, traded on the market, pay attention! Your mortgage, as long as it's securitized, traded on the market, is no longer a promise to pay. It's no longer an obligation to pay. However, you can't just go and say, I ain't got no obligation to pay. You say that's invalid. You can't use the Non-Judicial Foreclosure Act to pursue a debt collection on a note that has been securitized. The securitization operates as a condition. So, that's what we're here to discuss. And I have my right to a trial on that issue. Unless they can prove to the contrary, then I have my right to a trial on the issue. Evidentiary hearing, that's it. Okay. That's the premise of this whole entire 2-hour and 30-minute video, because I got to splice and connect the other video to this. Ta-da! So I got to take care of the last question. We got to refresh this. The whole premise of this conversation is that if there is a Non-Judicial Foreclosure Act claim where a party is seeking to foreclose on a property, where that property is evidenced by a mortgage that is traded on the market and has been securitized, and that there is over-collateralization, and that there has been pledged collateral in the form of a note before a banking institution by a bank, a person engaged in the business of banking, and doing a promissory note before a banking institution is constituted under law as banking business, then the Non-Judicial Foreclosure Act is inapplicable, because the note being placed on the record is not evidence of an obligation to pay in the form of a promissory note, but a note evidencing a promise to pay, which is completely different and distinct from an obligation to pay under Article 9. The non-judicial foreclosure guidelines, procedures, were designed under Article 9 for property that was secured by collateral evidenced by a promissory note. Promissory note being the optimum word. If the promissory note is in question, then the individual has a right to an evidentiary hearing and a trial on the issue. And the party bringing the claim must prove that their note qualifies under Article 9. And the very fact of it being associated with a mortgage-backed security and govern that mortgage-backed security under the securities laws equates to the rebuttable presumption identified by the Supreme Court in Ernst and Young. The Reeves decision clearly evidenced and documented that if it is a security and not a promissory note, and simply a note, then the Non-Judicial Foreclosure Act is inapplicable. That's the premise of this conversation. That's a whole lot of talking, ain't it? But this was a whole lot of conversation. What? 2 hours and 30 minutes is what it's going to equate to at least. And nobody's paying me for this. They're not paying me for this. They didn't ask me to do this. They're still getting a 2 hour and 30-minute conversation specifically on their issues. This is just to give them a better understanding of what they're dealing with. Just to give you all a better understanding as well. Pay attention. The non-judicial foreclosure statutes operate on the premise that the debtors secured a promissory note, an unconditional obligation, conclusion of law. If the instrument has been securitized and governed by external security instruments under the Securities Act, it ceases to qualify as an unconditional promise to pay under Article 9. It falls under Article 3. You cannot foreclose under the Non-Judicial Foreclosure Act under Article 3. Accordingly, any foreclosure process that depends on such an Article 9 promissory note cannot proceed non-judicially until the status of the instrument is judicially determined. The borrower is entitled to an evidentiary hearing to establish whether, but the burden is not on the borrower. The burden is on the party bringing forth the claim in the first instance that the promissory note that they have placed on the record still remains a promissory note and not a note. Also, you mentioned something, and it caught my attention. You mentioned that the securitization process, you said that the non-judicial foreclosure proceedings, you implied that it was only non-judicial proceedings. You didn't mention that the non-judicial foreclosure proceedings also applies to judicial foreclosures, and that the judicial foreclosure standing of the opposing party to foreclose using that note must be followed, and that they do not have a priority if the note has been securitized. Once the note has been securitized through the securitization process, it no longer operates as a secured debt. It becomes an unsecured debt by definition. Explain this, please. That was a lot too, wasn't it? But that's the whole purpose of all of this. You see, you think that only attorneys can sit up here and get detailed like this, but you can too. I didn't mention a single case. I don't have to mention a case. I have to mention just the law. Ernst & Young, this is the Rees versus Ernst & Young. A note is presumed a security unless it fits an exclusion. No, the note is presumed a security because it is traded on the market. Promissory note, hey, this says if it contains an obligation to pay a monetization, this is not a security. Provides a security interest attached only if the debtor right to the collateral is secured by blah, blah, blah. When a promissory note is sold and pooled and securitized, beneficial interest, cash flow, dividends, blah, 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 the investor holds not a lien on the borrower's property. No, we're going to do this over again. He's talking about a lien on the borrower's property. He just added nuances. Nobody's talking about a lien on the borrower's property. It has nothing to do with a lien on the borrower's property. It has everything to do with the note. Okay? No, he did it again. Because he's quoting some of the court cases. I know I hit that to stop it, and it wants to keep going. You stupid idiot. No one is talking about a lien on the property. We're talking about a note that contains conditions. It no longer qualifies under Article 9. So stop referencing the fact that the note is a monetary obligation to pay. And what you didn't mention is an instrument that may serve as collateral for a secure transaction, because that's not what Section 9 says. You added provisions that are not in the law. And Article 3 says that it is for notes, not for promissory notes. Non-judicial foreclosures are not enforcing non-secured transactions. The fact that the note has been securitized takes it out of Article 9 jurisdiction. And because it's no longer associated with Article 9, that means that the note in and of itself is no longer secured, because Article 9 governs only secured transaction. But once the note has been securitized, once the note has conditions, it no longer falls under Article 9. Get it right, you stupid idiot. Stop listening. Ladies and gentlemen, did you understand what I just said? If they want to keep it under Article 9, then it must be an unconditional promise to pay. If it's not an unconditional promise to pay, it doesn't fall under Article 9. They can't use the Non-Judicial Foreclosure Act. Is an unconditional promise to pay when a note becomes subject to additional governing records, such as pooling and servicing agreement, securitization, it becomes conditional. The note containing a condition no longer meets the definition of a promissory note under Article 9. Because Article 9 governs only secure transactions, a conditional securitized note falls outside the jurisdiction, and it no longer serves as security. It's no longer a secured debt. It is an unsecured debt, but they're coming into bankruptcy court and all these other places saying it is a secured loan. It is not but it's secured by property. That's not what makes it a secured loan. A secured loan means it's secured by property, and it's a promise to pay. Without that, they have no standing in law for a secured note. You must understand these little simple nuances. Yes, I know. The people who are watching this and the people who are going to be governed this way towards this video are going to understand. They're going to take the time to listen and understand what's being said here. Attorneys are going to have to now change their method of operating, because I'm coming. I've been silent and quiet, and I haven't been talking about all of this, but it's now time to get somebody's attention. This is only part of the conversation. We're only talking about one subject. The fact that the note is not a note. There's tons of other stuff that can be talked about, but this only took 2 hours, and plus I'm adding the other video, 45 minutes. Just one conversation about the note so that you can understand the note. Lordy be, Lordy be. There's a lot of people out there who are not going to watch this video because they're going to think they already understand all of this, and they don't. And I can prove to you that they don't. Because go and see if you see anybody else talking about these points that I've been raising here. Go ahead, I dare you. Just find me one video and I'll give that person the credit, and I'll say, they talked about it before me. Even if they talked about it after me, I will give them the credit for bringing it up before I did. Go ahead, find it and bring it to my attention. All right, other than that, we're going to let you guys go. I got to go eat. I'm only going to be eating some hard-boiled eggs. I got to go pick some duck eggs, too. I'm not eating the hard-boiled duck eggs. These are chicken eggs. I got to go through them because I had, I bought 60 eggs. Okay, and it was time for me to get through the eggs, so I decided to do hard-boiled. I'm going to use it for more than just eating hard-boiled eggs. Okay, and the devil's eggs, a couple of weeks ago with the duck eggs, man, that was great. But I'm in the mood for hard-boiled eggs. Sorry, I'm in the mood. All right, got to go. Y'all take care. 2 videos being spliced together, so this is going to be 2 hours and 45 minutes at least. Arrivederci.